Hi, my name is Andrey. I'm a head of product here at PDFTron. Today I'm going to talk to you about 3D PDFs in the future for the 3D standards inside of PDF document. Let's jump in. So when talking about 3D PDFs, it's really important just to go back in history of how 3D format came about in the first place in a PDF document. So just kind of stepping all the way back to 1990. So the portable document format is created in early 1990s. The PDFs are then rapidly adopted in all of the different verticals and use cases, including manufacturing, construction, and industrial applications. And then just right around 2005, some of the leaders in the space like Intel, Boeing, and Adobe come together to say, hey, let's actually grab and standardize 3D format inside of PDF documents. And this was Universal 3D U3D format with ECMA 363 script. So now the users in kind of manufacturing construction, they can pull up 3D models directly in the PDF documents and be able to open them. So the PDFs kind of act like a container for the 3D model. Then later, PRC format support was introduced as well. So what can we do inside of PDF documents with 3D models? Well, we can first and foremost visualize them, as well as support for kind of navigating the model. So I can rotate it around, I can jump to a specific views, or select multiple different camera angles. So this really kind of helps me combine the 3D world together with some of the 2D specifications that could be available around the document, just to kind of give me a bit of a context of what am I looking at. So in this case, we're looking at a car suspension. Maybe there's, a number of different parts that are going into it. So in manufacturing, it really becomes useful to kind of say, hey, this is all the different parts that comprise of the model and kind of make it happen. I can also kind of cut through the 3D model and kind of see all the different parts inside of it, and cross-section of the model comes up quite a bit in the construction industry, where when we're looking at the model, we're looking at kind of the building floor print or an architectural plan. There could be architectural pipe or electrical kind of going through it. So I want to kind of scan through it and section through it one by one and be able to see, okay, what's actually behind those walls, just to see how all of it comes together. Another thing that I can do is, let's refer back to the car suspension model here, is that I can traverse the object model tree. So when a 3D designer puts together this model, they'll create different objects that can comprise of this model, and they'll group it and they'll name it and provide like for each of the objects. So they will say, this is the brake disc, this is the rotor, this is the suspension link or absorber or shock absorber. To help me visualize how those components could be behaving under movement or pressure or stress, we can introduce 3D animations, and they're supported inside of 3D PDF standard. And another thing too is kind of to bring all of it together, I'd be able to mark up or annotate just the same way I would be able to do on a PDF, but inside of 3D model, inside of a PDF document. So I can go ahead and place my markup comments or specific callouts to bring someone's attention to that specific 3D part. I can also perform various measurements on the parts themselves just to figure out the distance between the different objects inside of this specific 3D model. One of the other confusing things that I find when it comes to 3D inside of a PDF is the fact that there are 3D annotations, and then there's also 3D views. So far, the previous screen that I showed you 3D view. Now, when talking about it, we can actually grab a PDF document and we are able to go ahead and overlay, or I guess instead of just placing a comment, we can actually place a whole 3D model as the comment. That would be a 3D annotation. So it's very similar feature support to the 3D view, except the 3D model is saved inside of the XFDF. And we also have the same format support as the 3D view, so we can support U3D and PRC. And again, it's not to be confused with annotating a 3D model in 3D view with annotation. Could get quite confusing. So what are the different use cases of 3D PDFs? So I already mentioned that it was rapidly adopted in manufacturing, construction, engineering. However, there's a number of other applications for 3D PDFs. And I'll kind of go through them one by one. So we've got manufacturing, construction, we've got medical, engineering, and geospatial as well. So manufacturing can receive a PDF with specifications, material properties, and can clarify any questions they might have around what type of material to use or any specific parts that need to be ordered, as well as there are any order numbers. Collaboration on product supply chain, and easily send it out for approval. You can kind of quickly visualize it, collect everyone's feedback, and then kind of move it to the next stage. And we can share that information with suppliers to see if they have any particular parts in stock based on our 3D drawing. In construction, we can go beyond 2D format and also include a 3D model. So I can have a 2D representation of the building floor print or architectural blueprint, but it can also include a 3D model visualization of it. And I'm able to toggle the walls and facilitate project takeoff use case where we can count the number of object present in the model. For example, if we're just talking about I've got my doors, I've got my windows, I've got my number of toilets that I need to install in that specific building. Again, it can really kind of speed that part along. In the medical space, again, it enables us to converse with suppliers for things like dental implants, medical equipment, and so on. In engineering, we can visualize data simulations like heat flow, wind friction on a Formula 1 car, computational fluid dynamics, and so on. And it's not just the ability to have and display the 3D model, but also kind of create 3D animations inside of it to kind of further enhance and facilitate the story that kind of goes behind. Now, it feels like the 3D PDF format, it felt abandoned for a long time, but it's really making a comeback with the PDF 2.0 as well as 3D PDF Consortium joining just a few months ago. So really kind of welcome the strong union between kind of the 3D organization together with the PDF organization, and just kind of seeing how we can advance those formats together. Right now, for kind of the 3D PDF viewing or annotating collaboratively available for everybody, the only choice is Adobe Reader at the moment. And with Adobe Reader, because we're kind of dealing with a number of going into different views, it's a bit confusing with the user experience of having to switch between and having to have different tools or context available. And none of the open source rendering engines on the web today, they actually have support for 3D PDFs. And a lot of companies already standardize their processes on PDF. However, with the loss of 3D support or not ability to kind of scale their applications to the web or mobile, and that missing link, they have to look for something else as they're moving away from desktop applications. Now, since there are a lot of companies who already standardize their processes on 3D PDF and set up their production, set up their manufacturing, and as we're scaling to web and everyone kind of moving towards web and mobile rather than having desktop applications, there's no really viable options out there. However, PDFTron's web viewer is going to be the first one to actually offer 3D PDF support in a web browser, where the users can open it up and be able to interact with the 3D models just the way they would inside of Adobe Reader and not having to rely on desktop applications for this particular use. Let's take a look at some of the different alternatives to the 3D PDF, and you can just use the original 3D model format. So what I'm talking about here is that the ability to go ahead and extract the 3D model in your U3D or PRC model and just kind of view it directly in whatever 3D rendering engine that we could be using. And there are pros to that, so you're no longer limited just to Adobe Reader for viewing. And depending on the format, you might actually have easier time rendering it on web and mobile. However, the context, the metadata, or any associated data with it is lost. And U3D and PRC itself could contain a lot of information. However, a lot of information actually sits outside of the 3D model itself. It sits within kind of that PDF context around kind of the views that are available, the scene setup. And now we're also kind of introducing the inconsistencies in user experience between different viewing applications. If previously our users were used to using Adobe Reader for viewing those 3D PDFs, if now we send them just to use 3D or PRC, they might be confused about which application to open it with. I believe on Windows you have a default 3D viewer, but on Mac it could be different. So they could be confused about where to go to actually open the model itself. And then, collaboration, again, is lacking there as well, and ability to provide comment and feedback on the panel. And the scene information might not carry over to other viewing applications. So let's say we're looking at it from a specific angle with a certain amount of lighting. That information will not carry over to the other viewers out there, and they might have to reconfigure all of that. And I mean, another option is to continue using Adobe Reader. The scene information is preserved. We get a bit of contexted UX, although it's a bit confusing. And the 3D viewing is just supported out of the box in the free version. Now, there are some cons to that. So the security of actually downloading and storing the PDF locally when we're just trying to get the feedback together on the document without necessarily having them to download the model or the PDF itself to be able to collaborate or annotate on top of it. And there's also, because they have to download and store the PDF locally, there's not a way to exercise a retention period on that particular document. It doesn't self-destroy after a certain amount of time of being on the user's local file system. So let's actually take a look at a quick demo of PDFTron's Web Viewer and ability to handle, 3D annotations. So ability to place a 3D annotation as a comment directly on a PDF. Okay, let's take a look. So here I have the Web Viewer running right in front of me, and inside of the PDFTron's Web Viewer we have loaded a floor plan, and inside of it it's a floor plan of, one bedroom apartment with a den here. And what I want to do is actually I want to be able to place some of the furniture that could be potentially used and kind of collaborate where certain furniture models are going to be dropped directly into the PDF just to kind of showcase of where they're going to go. So I'll just go ahead and navigate to the Insert menu, go over to the 3D and add the 3D object. In here I can actually pass the 3D object directly, or I can choose a file and pick for example, a chair where I want to do it. And I'll go ahead and place that specific chair directly in the bedroom. And what I'm able to do is position it directly in the bedroom. And then I can also go ahead and rotate to kind of take a look at this chair from all the different angles. And now, as you can see, my PDF is more than just a 2D file, more than just a 2D representation of floor plan. I'm really combining a number of different workflows here where I'm able to place a 3D model directly onto the PDF, and it still kind of follows all the same kind of properties of our annotation and collaboration. So I can say, this is the chair I was thinking of for our bedroom. So as you can see, there could be a number of different applications for 3D PDF revival on web, and provide users with the ability to kind of bridge these two worlds together and be able to annotate and collaborate with the 3D models on a PDF. I really appreciate you watching this presentation. Thank you so much for PDF Association for having us, and I will see you all later.
Hey there, Andrey.
Well, thanks so much for having us on the PDF Association.
Certainly, it's a bit early there, I know, today. So what questions do we have for Andrey? I know I'm curious. Go ahead.
Yeah, so feel free to actually go ahead and type in some of your questions in the questions tab. However, I have a few that already came in kind of during this. And kind of one of the questions is, what would be some of the best practices for actually handling or storing annotations on a 3D PDF or 3D annotations. And my recommendation is always to maintain them inside of XFDF and be able to save that XFDF string outside of the actual PDF, outside of 3D model. And this way, you can ensure that, first of all, you have a bit of a versioning. So if multiple people are coming in and they're annotating and commenting on the subject, we can kind of go back in history and provide a bit of audit trail, or we can actually start synchronizing it in a real-time database. Like, for example, Firebase offers that service where the XFDF markup that's coming in can be synced between all the different parties in real time, and we can enable collaboration on the 3D model itself, or whether it's just 3D annotations themselves.
Yep. Actually, do have some questions that started to come in here, and you may want to share your screen. I think I neglectfully, whichever it was you wanted to present during Q&A. So here's a question: what 3D formats can be converted into a PDF, and how?
So what 3D formats can be converted? So as I mentioned in the presentation, the formats that the PDF specification supports are U3D and PRC. However, there's hundreds and hundreds of different 3D formats. And usually the way new 3D formats kind of come about is, for example, something is missing from an existing 3D format, and a company with a big enough software department, they're like, let's go ahead and extend that and create a new 3D format. However, if you wish to kind of go ahead and get it into the PDF, you do need to convert it to U3D or the PRC model, and then be able to embed it inside of the PDF document. If you extract the U3D and PRC, you can convert it to pretty much any format that you want. And again, based on the vertical or the industry we're working with, we're going to face the different standard for each one of them. So, unlike PDF in 3D, there's a bit less standardization on a singular format. So we'll vary very differently based on, the platform you're on. So whether you're on web, mobile, or server, or you're talking about different verticals, like you're in construction versus medical versus engineering.
Mm-hmm. So do you have another question there? I have one here, but perhaps yours.
Yeah, one of the questions is kind of just piggyback off the existing question that you just asked me is, whether or not there's current plans to extend U3D and PRC support to other formats, and for example, such as STEP. And the answer is yes. That's actually something that a ISO committee is working on right now, to be able to support more 3D formats inside of a PDF document. And as we can see, it's, it felt like there was a bit of a kind of a slump in terms of kind of 3D excitement in the PDF document. But as the PDF gets adopted and growing more and more, we are now starting to see kind of the revival and extendability of the PDF document to support other 3D formats.
Okay, I think I see another question from Michael. Does your viewer support mobile devices?
Yeah, so whenever we design anything with PDFTron, we ensure that it's fully responsive. So because, on a browser, the browser itself can be resized in a number of different ways. And the way, for example, one would go about building a mobile application today is, really kind of utilizing the same code base. So we see a lot of it whenever somebody developing a mobile app, they will just kind of grab and embed web viewing directly in their mobile app, or just write on one of the frameworks like React Native or Flutter. And as such, we've got to ensure that everything is responsive. So, but we do have also native mobile as the case as well, that just handle the PDF viewing, rendering, annotation, markup, and measurement.
Mm-hmm. All right. Excuse me. You have any other questions there?
No, I think I'm all good from my
Okay.
side as well. Again, I really want to thank you for coming out and kind of staying with us and watching the presentation. If you do have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to me. My contact is Andrey, Andrey at PDFTron.com. You can just send me an email with any questions or follow-ups you might have after this presentation, or you can subscribe to our YouTube channel that contains past conferences and some of the kind of showcase examples or cool projects. So do check it out on PDFTron SDK on YouTube.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Andrey. Well, once the webinar ends, you will receive a brief survey. We'd really appreciate your feedback as it helps us plan for future PDF Days events. In addition, tomorrow you'll receive a follow-up email with a link to a recording of today's webinar. On behalf of the PDF Association, thank you for joining us today and have a great rest of your day. Thanks, Andrey.
Thank you. Bye-bye.